everybody. Welcome to Into the Wormhole. I'm Larissa Maestro, and I'm here with my number one.
That Lauren chick.
That Lauren chick.
Going with that one this time.
So the world is still pretty bonkers out there, and we know that. We're still doing research on our own and working on episodes for the future that focus more on social justice in Star Trek. And we're also working on an episode that sort of expands on a blog post that I did for Women at Warp, which is a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast that focuses on or explores specifically mixed race representation in the Star Trek canon. But for now, we wanted to give you a little break. This is going to be a very fun episode where we start a series that we've been talking about, where we dive into the sort of like Star Trek remakes or remixes that happen over the years. I mean, it's like 60 years of content. So they definitely go back to plots and redo them, or, you know, pay homage to a past episode. And this is going to be the first of those that we talk about. Lauren, do you want to tell everybody what it is?
Oh, I do. I hope I don't get tongue-tied. First of all, we will say that this is, once again, we did it again. We recorded this 2 hours of tape only to find out that things were kind of messed up on my end. We think we got this figured out. And so we're recording this one again. So you'll hear us say things like, oh yeah, last time we brought up this point. That is why. So, Larissa, are we ready for...
I have a good feeling about this one.
Well, it's nice. It's like a little dress rehearsal. So I'm ready for take two.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. So this time for the remix, one of the ones that really stood out for us is, you know, the original series, The Tribble with Tribbles, which, Larissa, I know you have it in front of you. Tell us what season and episode that is of TOS.
Season 2, episode 13 of TOS.
Thank you. And then we're putting that one against, obviously, Deep Space Nine, Trials, and Tribulations.
Aww.
Yes. And we're going to have a special guest appearance by a short trek, which is The Trouble with Edward. So that'll be a fun little bonus thing that we're going to add to this.
All the instances of Tribbles that exist in Star Trek series, I think.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Tribbles are the Pomeranian of space, I've decided. And I feel like for most people, even if they don't know Star Trek, there's a couple things that we know as a society. We know Beam Me Up, Scotty. We know Set Phasers to Stun. And a lot of us would know what a Tribble is, even if we're not a Star Trek person.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would probably say that Trouble with Tribbles is the most famous TOS episode, right?
I think so. I think a lot of people would say it's definitely one of the most iconic, you know, along with a few others. But it's kind of one of those pop culture references that people get.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. There's that scene in this episode, this TOS episode, with, you know, William Shatner sitting in the pile of Tribbles that's been made into a meme like over and over and over again. Yes. So I'm excited. I'm excited to talk about this goofy shit.
It's going to be good.
Some goofy shit.
We talked about wacky Star Trek when we talked about Rascals, and I think this might be one of the earliest wacky Star Trek episodes. But it's a fun one. I will say it's kind of amusing to think that back in the day when it was made, Gene Roddenberry himself and some other people involved with the show were not very fond of this episode, which is surprising because over time it has become so beloved and, again, an iconic episode. And a lot of times when you see sort of essential Star Trek episode lists, this is one of them for TOS, this episode, The Trouble with Tribbles.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny. I sometimes enjoy imagining what it must have been like to make a series like Star Trek at the time that it was being made in the late 60s, and how hard it probably was for someone like Gene Roddenberry to like really get his vision across. And this episode in particular really seems like it was like the studio saying, hey, we're competing with Lost in Space. We need some crazy shit. We need people punching each other in the face. It needs to be snappy and entertaining. Let's do this. And Gene being like, oh, God, fine. You know, like
Yeah, no, it's definitely a fun furry ride.
yeah.
And it's, I think there's actually a lot of, it's not just the premise. I mean, actually, when you watch it, it's got snappy dialogue. I think the pacing is good. You know, I actually think this one's a good example of A story and B story that are quite different from each other, but they come together really nicely.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
one,
agreed.
yeah, and sometimes in Star Trek, maybe the A story will be stronger than the B story, or one kind of bogs down the other. But in this case, they're completely different tones, but they both work equally as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to give us a recap?
Okay, I like first.
Just a real
Is this
quick
because-
recap, because last time I tried and I couldn't stop just thinking about Tribbles. Like I couldn't, like for some reason, just tell what was in the episode. I was just like, there's
Tribbles. And then I finally was like, Larissa, do you need help? I got.
Yeah.
Usually you're the one who has all the names and all the details, and I'm like, oh my
I
god,
know.
no.
Like for some reason, this episode, like the it just didn't stick to my brain. I don't know why. I think maybe I was like sewing while I was watching it or something. Like, yeah. Who knows?
Quite all right.
Who knows?
I hope you were sewing some Tribble embroidery.
Yes, I was embroidering Tribbles on all of my pants.
By the way, I bet we can find that somewhere on the internet.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, so yes, the trouble with Tribbles. So in this episode, what happens is it opens up and Kirk gets called to a space station, which I believe is K7.
Yeah.
Because we have the highest priority security alert is going, on the space channel. So he gets over there. And during this time, it's very important to note that there's a planet called Sherman's Planet. And both the Klingons and the Federation have claim to it. And so what's going to happen is basically both sides have to state their case about why one would be more successful at actually kind of settling it. And that's going to determine who gets it. So that's an important part here. They get to the space station and Kirk is pissed off to find out that Mr. Barris, who is a Starfleet official, I believe in agriculture of some sort, who's in charge of a genetically modified grain, a super grain, that is going to be very important to the Federation claiming their stake on Sherman's planet. So, of course, for him, this is the utmost importance and what's high security. Kirk and him don't see eye to eye, and their kind of bickering is played to comic effect throughout the episode to kind of match the tone. Yeah. At the same time, he has Darvis, right? Assistant Darvis? Darvin.
Arn Darvin.
Darvin. Yes, Assistant Darvin, who's there and will be an important character. Meanwhile, a Klingon ship shows up. Both crews have shore leave on the station. Uhura and Chekhov go to the bar/mess hall where they run into a seedy used car salesman-esque character named Jones, who is trying to sell the bartender a fuzzy little purring creature, our Tribble, the titular Tribble. And so he strikes up a deal with the bartender for 6 credits, a Tribble, which I don't know what that, translates to in today's currency. And
yeah, like how much Bitcoin is
right.
that?
And he gives one to Uhura so that she can show it around to all her friends and make them super popular. They start multiplying, of course, on the ship.
And then McCoy decides to check him out to see what makes them tick.
Yes.
And discovers that they are literally born pregnant.
Yes.
And then mentions that they reproduce bisexually.
Yeah, I love that note.
We don't, there's no way they really understood what they were talking about.
Exactly.
I think they meant, asexually.
They kind of meant like they're like worms, where worms can just reproduce, like, or it makes me think of that scene in Jurassic Park where they explain like, oh, we use frog DNA so they can just be flexible with their reproduction. But anyways, so they're realizing, okay, this is going on.
Meanwhile, there's a huge fight in the mess hall because the Klingons, or the Klingons, as they call them on TOS, insult Kirk and the Enterprise to Scotty and Chekhov, and they start a huge fight, a hilarious huge fight with lots of face punching and lots of people like rolling over the bar and shit. Everyone gets in trouble. Everyone gets sent to quarters. And then everyone's like freaking out because there are Tribbles fucking everywhere, right? They end up finding out that
that could be kind of a verb. I like that. Like, the Tribbles are fucking everywhere.
They're
themselves.
They're fucking everywhere. The bridge is covered in Tribbles. There are Tribbles everywhere. There are also Tribbles on the space station, and these Tribbles have eaten through all of the grain, this genetically modified grain supply. But what they find out is that after they eat this grain, they die. So, like, something's up with the grain. They realize the grain's been poisoned, and they don't know why. Eventually, they use a Tribble and find out that this assistant guy, Arn Darvin, is actually a Klingon who has been
altered.
He's been altered to look human, and he's like an undercover agent trying to sabotage the Federation's claim to colonize this planet. And they find out because Tribble gets mad at him. It's weird. Like, Tribbles don't like Klingons. So he gets like banished from the Klingon Empire and his career is over or whatever. And then at the end of the episode, there's a hilarious moment where nobody wants to tell Kirk what happened to all the Tribbles. And then finally Scotty's like, I beamed them all onto the Klingon bird of prey. So, the end. This episode's hilarious.
It's and here's the thing. It sounds like it shouldn't work, but I really do think the comedic tone and approach they take, which is one of the reasons why Roddenberry and the people kind of involved more in the production of it weren't so kind and loving to this episode. They thought it was too silly for Star Trek to do. They thought it was not what Star Trek is about. And it ended up being a really well-known and popular episode. But it's done really well. It's, like I said, snappy. There's a lot of great bickering and kind of adversarial stuff between Barris and Kirk. There's that kind of feeling between Spock and McCoy, which is great. They have a couple of really funny moments. Yeah, like it actually, like I said, it moves itself along, and by the end you have a really good time.
Yeah, it really, really does.
Yeah. I hope you don't mind if I go on my little character rant that I did last time, because I feel like this is the perfect opportunity. And this kind of goes back to a couple things. We talked about Paul Dooley from The Wire in Deep Space Nine, and how he only has 5 minutes, but he makes a big impact. But one of the things I brought up is that ideally, when you're telling a story, you kind of want your script and your dialogue to do a few things. You want it to actually move along the plot, which is important. Preferably it's entertaining and engaging to your audience. And then finally, if you can also say something about your character while you're doing it, that's great. So that we have, little bits of character development here and there. And, you're talking about Scotty. And Scotty, to me, and Jones, who you brought up, are two great examples of that. Scotty, we see him, first of all, Kirk has to shove him off the ship and force him to take shore leave. Because Scotty says, I'd rather just be in my room studying my tech manuals. And and Kirk kind of convinces him by saying, like, look, I need you to make sure no tomfoolery goes on while they're down there. So he's kind of sent to babysit the other crew of the Enterprise. While he's down there, there is the bar brawl scene where the Klingons are trying to stir up trouble. And Chekhov is ready to fight one because the Klingon keeps insulting Kirk. And Scotty says, calm down. It's okay. We're above all that. But once the Klingon starts insulting the ship, Scotty loses it. And he's actually the one who throws the first punch and starts this bar fight.
I love it.
And then that leads to another moment where Kirk finds out that Scotty has caused this, and Scotty's explaining, oh, well, they started to insult you. And Kirk says, oh, well, I see. You were defending my honor. And he's like, well, not exactly. I held Chekhov back, but then they started insulting the ship. And so that, again, is a funny moment where you realize Scotty's kind of buttons are with the ship. And of course, Kirk doesn't know how to quite to take this. Quirk Kirk ends up
Kirk
sending.
I'm sorry. Now I'm thinking about
Quark.
Quark and Kirk hybrid.
Scotty,
like send them through that transporter with the orchid and
there we go.
A Kirk and Quark hybrid named Quirk.
No, thank you.
Oh no, I don't even know what that would be like. Anyway, sorry to derail.
No.
Anyone wants to Photoshop that for me too, please.
But then Kirk says, like, okay, Scotty, you have to stay in your quarters. And Scotty's like, thank you. I can study my tech manuals. And so he has a great moment. Like, all that stuff just, serves him in the episode, which is great. And then the other one is Jones, like you were saying. I'll just quickly go through. Jones doesn't have that much screen time. And this is his only episode. But he makes such an impression, not only the way he's played by that actor, but when there is this big bar brawl scene, they use that as an opportunity to show him sneaking behind the bar. And he's, getting his own drinks. And then he's carrying them through this sort of maze of Klingons and Starfleet crew that are fighting, gets to the door. The door opens, and just about as he's about to get a drink, bartender comes and takes it away from him. But he reaches into his other pocket where he takes out the second drink. And that's just another scene that it's really fun. It allows the bar brawl scene to play out and kind of raise the stakes, so to speak, of why these crews get in trouble with each other. And they use it as a great opportunity to have this lighthearted moment that not only echoes the tone of the episode, but in the end, again, like shows so much about Jones as a character without a single line of dialogue from him, just through his actions. It's a fun scene. And those moments not only happen in this episode, but the Deep Space Nine version, and even up to the Trouble with Edward, the short trek.
Yes, absolutely. That kind of like physical humor.
There's a lot of sight gags.
Yes. Like very just like over the top silliness, which then like brings me to let's dive in and talk about the Tribbles.
The Tribbles themselves.
Okay. Like, I want to say I would totally be Uhura, and I would be like, give me that Tribble. It is adorable. I want to hold it and love it forever and ever, even though it doesn't have a face. And then I would be the one that like spread them around the whole ship and mess everything up. But they are so simple. They're just like little fur balls. Like there's nothing like why are they cute? It's
I can
they're just little balls of fur that purr.
It's true. Well, actually, from a character design place, yeah. I mean, the circle is the shape that humans are the most attracted to. Actually, and usually the more simplistic it is, the more we can kind of respond to it.
Interesting.
But we actually have a very like pure response to simple shapes. That's why when you look in character design, Mickey Mouse, bunch of circles. R2D2, he's a circle. And then here's a great thing. Sorry. We always talk about Star Wars, at least once, I feel like. But it's true. Okay, you look at R2D2, who's circles and circles, circles. You go to Jar Jar Binks, failure.
Yeah.
And then what did Disney do?
On so many levels, a failure on every level.
And then when you get back to, I have to admit, like Disney taking over Star Wars, they introduced BB-8, who literally is a circle.
He's
a
literally
rolling circle.
just a circle.
And then the Porg.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
oh my God, you're totally right.
We respond really well to circles. And the Tribble's a great example of that, especially since there's no face or anything. It's just like, here. It's a soft circle, sphere.
I mean, if we were comparing the Tribbles to Fizzgig from the Dark Crystal, that Fizzgig is basically a Tribble, but does have a face.
It's a very scary face. Lots of teeth.
So many teeth.
I said if you combine like a Tribble with like the 1980s B movie Critter design, you get Fizzgig.
Yeah.
Ugh.
I remember you had a piece of trivia about them actually creating these and making them and what they use and how many they made and all of that stuff.
Should I go through that? Is now a good time?
Yeah.
Okay, so to make some of them move, because I always was curious, like, do they have someone like underneath the table just kind of moving a stick? Or So the ones that are moving, a lot of them are filled with mechanical wind-up toys so that they would just kind of bop around a little bit. Yes, so there were 500 Tribbles made. This is all from Memory Alpha, by the way. 500 Tribbles that were made for $350. It looks like they were all made by one woman, excuse me.
That is insane. One person making 500 Tribbles. Like, I mean, I guess you could equate that to like people who are like mass producing face masks right now, because they're not like they can't be that difficult to make.
Oh, especially a Tribble.
They're just like plush like, circles.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
Just like
so you're gonna pattern and like get it going pretty quickly, but like that's some pretty monotonous, like intense work. And she got less than $1 for each Tribble.
I know. And then, that's
lot of them, bullshit.
A lot of them started to disappear from the set because they started to become a collector's item. So you kind of hope she at least got some so that she could sell them. Yeah. And then the other little fun piece of trivia I just had was that Scotty's kids in real life would come to the set, and his two little boys accidentally went wandering off and opened up a storage cabinet, and 200 Tribbles fell on them, and they immediately got, left the scene of the crime. But I love the fact that the kind of Kirk avalanche scene happened in real life to some extent.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the story of Trouble with Tribbles,
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, I do have a couple of notes because they'll come into play when we talk about Deep Space Nine.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
First of all, poor Chekhov, because he's trying to do everything from impress people with his knowledge of vodka and history and everything, and no one's giving him the time of day. He has a joke in the beginning about the way Klingons smell, which Spock immediately puts him down for that. So that'll come into play.
I mean, because it's rude, Chekhov.
Or as Spock says, extremely little ensign. When Chekhov says he's just telling a little joke, Spock says, extremely little ensign. The other thing is the bar scene. We have to take note of the butterfly dress waitresses.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, which I really hope somebody out there has cosplay as this at some sort of convention or something, because they're amazing. They really look like outfits that maybe were just on the CBS set, like the production lot, and they said, well,
yeah,
take those will do, we just need something funky. But they are opaque tights, and then it's like a one-piece overall romper, and at the bottom, at the lower back where the overall straps meet the bottom of the shorts, there's these little fairy butterfly wings.
Yeah.
And it's so silly. It's a great little costume moment, and that will also come into play. I also said this episode is brought to you by the color purple. They really like their lighting in this episode, and purple shows up a lot.
I fucking love it. It's great.
Before we move on, though, you, in our first attempt to record this episode, you mentioned something about the music, and that started a very important sort of thread throughout the whole episode. So,
oh yeah, totally. Yeah. The music in this episode is fucking awesome. It is so goofy and silly and over the top, and it does a lot of things that are normally associated with cartoons. In film scoring, they call it Mickey Mousing, when the music is like doing exactly what is happening on screen. So like somebody gets thrown over like a tabletop, and a flute goes.
Oh, so it's like like
that.
If Bugs Bunny is like tiptoeing through a room, it'll be like,
yeah, it's like ding, 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 ding.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that's called Mickey Mousing. So there's a lot of very cartoonish underscore to this episode. It is all recorded by real orchestral musicians. So like they had to write all this stuff out and then go to a studio, and people had to read it and play it, as opposed to like nowadays everyone's got samples in their computer and they can make it on their own and do whatever they want. This is all orchestrated music, which is so much fun to listen to. Stuff from this time is so much fun to listen to because it's actually like really complex. It's actually difficult. Like some of the most silly sounding music in shows like this is the hardest stuff to play. It is because it's just weird and it's not written to be like musical on the instrument. It's written to like serve a purpose as far as like texture or something else.
Yeah.
So,
It really like almost.
So it's just harder to do. Yeah.
It's almost like they take the visual and express it through music, sound, however you want to say it. But
yeah, exactly.
like you said, very complex.
Yes. So like the bar scene in particular, there's lots of moments like that where the music is like highlighting specific things that are happening in the scene, where somebody's punching someone in the face, and like moment by moment the music changes to serve exactly what you're seeing on screen. So it's so much fun. The composer's name is Jerry Fielding, and he did a lot of work on Star Trek. He was one of several composers that wrote underscore, and that's pretty normal for most television shows. They'll have a few different composers work on different episodes. I mean, great job, Jerry Fielding. You did great.
Yeah. The music,
we love
not
it.
Not only is it perfect, in a way, but it's just so appropriate, and it does what you want it to do. It sort of heightens the narrative and what's going on. Not to jump ahead, but just because it's so important to the point we're making now. In the Deep Space Nine episode, when they do their version of the bar brawl, they made the comment afterwards that if they could have changed one thing, it was the music that they used for that scene, because they had to change it a little bit to go on with the new narrative that was happening in the Deep Space Nine episode. But they realized that in doing so, they kind of lost the effect and the mood that the original music had. And it definitely is very noticeable.
Yeah, it really does make a huge difference, especially after watching them back to back, because as I said before, there's so much Mickey Mousing. There's so much like sort of over the top, silly orchestration. And this underscore doesn't really have that. It's more modern and a little more serious. Although I do really love this composer, Dennis McCarthy, who actually wrote the DS9 theme.
Oh, okay.
So Goldsmith wrote TNG and Goldsmith wrote Voyager, but Dennis McCarthy, who's like a veteran writer for the composer for the series, wrote DS9. So it was like they brought in the big guns for this episode, and he's a veteran. He's a Trek veteran. So somebody like him, he wrote underscore for a lot of TNG as well. Bringing him in was I'm sure a calculated decision, which I love. Like, I love that they are thinking about all of those things, even though that part of the score does kind of break things up and fall a little bit short as far as energy level. The fact that they made a point to be like, we got to ask Dennis. I appreciate that.
Oh, yeah, especially
as a musician.
Especially, again, it being like the 30th anniversary. You kind of want to bring in, like you said, those big guns. It's just funny because it completely changes the tone. I mean, in this version, you see Jones walking through the crowd of his drinks. They have that footage still in there, and it just makes it so much more suspenseful in a funny in a way that it's funny, but it's not meant to be funny. But looking back at it, it just completely changes now. Like, oh God, is he gonna drop his drinks? I'm on the edge of my seat.
It really seems like the director asked Dennis McCarthy to pay more attention to score the DS9 story instead of scoring the TOS story, which I totally understand. From his perspective, that probably seemed like the best idea, but that scene is supposed to be dumb.
Well, and
not dumb, but like it's supposed to be like
again, like farce. And you're right, like because of the Deep Space Nine storyline, it has to be something that's much more dramatic. And actually, like, this is a very small complaint too. I think the first time, once we started talking about it, we just realized it was a very interesting example to talk about how music and narrative comes together and the difference it makes when you change it up.
Oh my God, it is so important. If you're a person that's not a musician.
If you're a person, maybe.
Oh God, help me.
Like, maybe you're a cat.
Maybe you're a Tribble. In which case, I don't know how you're listening to this because you don't have a face or ears. But if you're a person that doesn't necessarily pay attention to underscore, or somebody who's not a musician who doesn't maybe consciously notice those things, I would challenge you to, next time you're watching a TV show or a movie, to like pay a little more attention to what the music is doing. It really can like make or break a scene. And that's one of the reasons why I love film scoring so much. Jerry Goldsmith specifically, he scored First Contact, which is one of my favorite Star Trek scores. Oh my God, I love it so much. The
I'm gonna have to, it's been a long time. I'll have to go back that and pay attention.
Oh, I get that stuck in my head. I get the First Contact score stuck in my head regularly. I'm not joking. It's so true.
I believe you.
Anyway.
Okay.
DS9.
Yeah, this was the Trials and Tribulations, which I believe is season 5, episode 6. Yeah, I got one. Yay. Usually I'm just like, whatever, it's later. And
it's after Avery Brooks shaved his head.
So, yeah, Larissa, bring us into the Deep Space Nine episode. This episode was made to celebrate the 30th anniversary of Star Trek.
Yes. So this is totally an homage to the original episode. If you have seen it, you'll remember it as the one where they are literally like walking around the first Enterprise and
in the costumes,
wearing the costumes and everything. So the beginning of the episode starts off with the arrival of 2 people from the Department of Temporal Investigations, and they are here to talk about what the crew has just gone through, which is the story of the episode. So Sisko is being interviewed about it, and he starts the narration. They're on the Defiant, and I can't remember how they find Barry Waddle.
Well, you know what? I don't know. I know the Cardassians are handing over a orb from the Bajorans. We have the Orb of Time.
Yes, that's right.
And they happen to have an older Darvin with them. Wait, Darvin or Darvis? See, I'm already forgetting.
Well, he calls himself Barry Waddle.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's right. But
so they are delivering. That's right. So they're on the Defiant, and they're delivering the Orb of Time from the Cardassians back to Bajor. And they somehow happen upon this guy, Barry Waddle, and he ends up on the ship, and he's this older dude, and he's kind of weird, and he's saying a lot of like racist shit about Klingons in front of Worf, like calling them foul-smelling barbarians.
Which is a callback to the first episode where Chekhov makes the joke about Klingon smelling. Wah wah.
Yes. And then I think Julian says that Worf smells like lavender or something, and it turns into a whole thing, but it's adorable. So all of this happens. They've got Waddle on the ship. They don't really know who he is, but he ends up using the Orb of Time to transport them back in time to exactly the place and time that the original episode, The Trouble with Tribbles, takes place. Because it turns out Barry Waddle is Arn Darvin, and he is trying to go back in time to get revenge on Captain Kirk for exposing him as a spy and ending his career and getting him exiled. So at its basic level, this is the crew trying to recapture Arn Darvin, who has also planted a bomb inside of a Tribble somewhere, to find the Tribble bomb and disarm it, and to recapture Arn Darvin, and do all of this without affecting the timeline. At the end of the episode, you get the end of basically this formal inquiry that the Department of Temporal Investigations is conducting with Sisko, and they're basically like, okay, I mean, that's fine. It sounds like everything is fine, and then they leave. It's
But it's really smart because, first of all, I'm just going to call them like the time cops, like very Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Yes, that's right.
These time cops, as I'll just call them. What it is, it's a framework, this sort of, them and Sisko having a conversation about what happened. It's a very efficient way to just sort of give exposition to the viewer.
Yeah.
And so instead of maybe a 5-minute scene, you can just be like, boom, this is what happened. I just told the time cops in 15 seconds. Let's go to scene. Because really the focus is seeing the Deep Space Nine gang mixed into the episode of Trouble with Tribbles. Like, that's the gold. So they actually are very light on all the kind of extra layers of the Deep Space Nine stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe sometimes to a point where you're like, hey, wait a minute. But it's like they just want to get you to them being in the old costumes on the old Enterprise and keep it rather efficient. So it's actually a nice framing device with the storytelling.
Yeah, because like that's the whole purpose of this episode. We're not like doing anything for the story arcs of the DS9 characters here.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, aside from like how their character is reacting to being back in this time period, you could remove this episode from DS9 and everyone would still be as they are. So like nothing big happens to any of our DS9 characters here. And that said, it is so much fucking fun to watch this episode. Like you can tell, like you can just kind of feel that like everyone was feeling a lot of joy in making it, that they were all so excited. Like it's kind of visceral. Like you can like see like smiles on everyone's faces, like just being so excited to do it. There's so much care put into the sets, like recreating them perfectly and like making them look Technicolor, you know, like like doing all the things that they had to do to really make them look like they're in the space. And that I think, especially considering that, like, when did this come out? Like 1996, I think. I want to say 96. Yes, I am correct.
Ooh.
This episode came out in 1996, and this is like early CGI. You know, like Forrest Gump was one of the first movies, I think, to like put a character into archival footage and make it look like at least semi-believable. And they're doing that here. And I mean, watching it on Netflix like this past week, it looks good.
Yeah, I was actually,
you know?
I was really curious how this episode was going to hold up, given that a lot of the high definition TVs aren't very kind to older.
Right.
Yeah.
Are they going to look cut out?
Yeah, but no, it does well. And it really is sort of a labor of love, not only on the behind the scenes, but again, like you said, the actors, we're just having actors, director, all the people involved were just having so much fun with it. And in the back, you're right. Like they had to recreate these sets. The original Enterprise was in more museum environments. They couldn't just roll it out of storage. So they had to rebuild those. They would take screenshots of the buttons on the bridge and other scenes and the blinking colors and patterns that the light had in the hallways and painstakingly recreate that. There was only like a few details that they couldn't recreate for, you know, maybe a business who made a certain thing went out of business, and so it was, you know, it
was like chairs or something, right?
Something,
like,
there was like a
kind of chair.
I can't remember what it was, but yeah, like they pulled somebody who worked on the original episode or the original show, and they pointed it out, and it was like they got pretty damn close. But yeah, when they filmed it, they used the same kind of lenses and filters and stuff, so they really tried to do their homework and blend the two together. And sometimes you can tell, like when they go from a shot from the original scene that maybe is just, say, Kirk and Spock, and then they click over to the hallway where it's Sisko and Dax. Like, sure, sometimes you could tell one is just different from the other. But when they merge the two, it's actually pretty damn good. And if you watch it right now, you know, if you stream it, it's...
Yeah,
I think it works.
Like that scene where Kirk and Spock are like talking on the intercom, and Dax and Sisko are standing behind them. I mean, it's totally believable. That's the scene where she says that Spock is hot.
Yes,
which I find to be adorable, especially since she ended up marrying Leonard Nimoy's son. And this was before I think they even met.
Oh, I'm pretty sure that it's before. Yeah, they were involved,
which is some adorable foreshadowing.
Which is kind of weird. It's like,
someone was clairvoyant or something.
You think my dad's hot? Whoa.
Somebody had a premonition about it. But yeah, exactly. Like the moments where, and this is another reason why it was so much fun to watch them back to back.
Yes, I agree.
Because I don't think I have ever watched these 2 episodes back to back before. And having the memory of the TOS episode fresh in my mind and then immediately watching the DS9 episode was like so satisfying and lovely, because I remembered what that scene looked, or the scene where Kirk is dressing down his officers after the fight, and Miles and Julian have been
they've been put in
there. It's so like it's just lovely.
It's satisfying. It's very satisfying.
It's very satisfying. Also, Dax looks hot as fuck in that outfit.
Well, they definitely they acknowledge in the beginning with the outfits about the colors. The colors are different because Bashir is confused, and of course he has to give a very Bones line of like, "I'm a doctor, not a historian." Of course, but
there's all those callbacks are really cute.
And then
what do they say? I have it written down here. They say Operations wore red, Command wore gold, and women wore less.
Yes,
is what Dax says.
And so it's cute that they acknowledge that. We were talking the first time we tried to record this how technically in TNG with season 1 they did have the squirt, which you guys might remember. The really short.
Deanna's like basically wearing a long shirt. Like she's not. It's so short. And Marina Sirtis has talked about that at conventions and been like, it was terrible and I hated it. That like her butt would like stick to any chair that she was sitting on because like she didn't have anything covering it.
Oh my gosh,
because it was so short.
And do you remember they had a couple of guys wearing it?
Yeah, the scant. I love it. I loved that. I loved the gender neutral skirt situation thing. I thought that was cool. I wish that they had kept it, but instead they just made everyone wear
which is probably more practical, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, you want your legs covered up if you're going on an alien planet. You don't know what's down there.
Yeah, but you're right. I'll just jump in and say if you're trying to plan like kind of a Star Trek night with family or friends, these 2 are very fun and satisfying to watch right after each other, because you do get those moments where, again, the Klingon smell, like the fact that each episode opens with that. A lot of the same relationships and banter is similar. For instance, in this episode, Odo and Worf are definitely played off of each other, the way Bones and Spock are in the first one.
Yeah, that's true. That's
where
true.
Both Spock and Worf have very. In Spock's case, he is just doesn't really get the whole attraction of the little fuzzy guys. And then Worf is very aggressive and hostile towards the Tribbles, which I'm sure we'll get into. And Odo and McCoy are there to sort of just poke fun at, the other person in their scene. And so that's like a fun echo.
Yeah. I actually like really love that because it totally sets up like, here's Worf. He's a Klingon. This is like, how many years later would DS9 be from TOS? I don't know the math. It's like, it's a long time. But here's Worf now as a modern Klingon to say like, they became a mortal enemy of the Klingon Empire and we destroyed their homeworld and they are an infestation and I hate them. And this is all because Scotty beamed them all onto that Klingon ship. And like we now get to hear like what happened after that, which is hilarious. And also just like Worf hating on a tiny fuzzy circle that everyone else thinks is cute is like, of course he would. He's like such a grouch. Of course he would hate it. Even if Klingons didn't have that history with Tribbles, he would hate it anyway.
Yeah, so
it makes sense.
Worf is used to great effect in this episode.
Oh, yeah, and then there's him explaining why the Klingons look different.
I was going to ask you to go into that.
the difference between Klingons and Klingons.
Yes, because the butterfly waitresses do come back. They recreate a couple of those butterfly waitress outfits. And a waitress comes over saying, if anyone, orders a rattagino, or what is it, a rattachino or
Ractagino.
God, I can't say that.
It's okay.
She's going to, freak out. And they're like, well, who ordered that? And she's like, the Klingons, duh. And of course, Odo and Is it Miles?
I think Miles and Julian are all there too.
They're looking around like, where are the Klingons? And then she kind of points them out, and then they all look to Worf being like, dude, do you want to explain this?
And he's like, we don't talk to people about that.
Which is such a great way to sidestep it, but in a fun way that, again, like, is the same tone of the episode where he's like, we do not discuss it with outsiders.
Yeah, I fucking love it. I love it so much. Because, like, you know, the early Klingons are just, like, dudes with the same facial hair and hairstyle that are all wearing the same outfit. Like, there are no prosthetics. There's nothing that sets them apart really at all other than their hairstyles and their outfits. There's a lot we could unpack with just, like, Klingons in general, but, like, it's interesting to see those two design elements coming to a head, which is, like, kind of a hole in Star Trek storytelling anyway, that people before this episode were like, why do they look so dope? Like, what happened?
Yeah.
And we address it without actually,
exactly.
Like, we point at it, but we don't have to actually go in there and talk about
it's a moment of, like, wink wink to the audience of, like, don't worry, people, we thought about this. And, you know, it's a show. Because even in eventually they would try to write an Enterprise, an episode, and an explanation around it. Which I know is fresh in your brain because you just wrapped that up. But
yeah, I did. Yeah, totally. But, like, at this time, this is, you know, because this is pre-Enterprise, we're here like having the first actual acknowledgement of the discrepancy here between what is a Klingon and what is a Klingon.
But I say job well done with the way they handled it.
Yeah. I mean, there's really, I have no complaints about this episode. It is just a whole lot of fun. I also really enjoy just following Dax around and how, like, excited Dax is to be back in this time because she lived during this time as Curzon.
Yes.
Right?
And I think well, she also mentions when she was with Bones about her.
It wasn't Curzon.
Yeah, you're right. It was the gymnast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I forget the name of that.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. It
Moving
really
on.
Matter. But, like, her just being so excited about the design and, like, the outfits and, like, just being a history nerd in a way, like, walking around. I think you said last time that she really does represent the fandom.
Yes. The writers intended for Dax and her enthusiasm for being on the Enterprise in this time period. It was supposed to reflect not only the writers' sort of giddiness, but also the fan base of, like, how people would really respond. And so, yeah, she's very excited, and Sisko kind of has to keep her under control, keep her enthusiasm down a little bit.
It's really adorable, and you know, for obvious reasons, it's really fun to watch her, like, get super excited.
And she's crazy tall in this episode. We both were.
She's so tall because her hair is also really tall.
Yes, with the heels and the hair, and I think she's already tall to begin with. You're just like, oh my gosh, she's so tall.
Yeah, she's taller than Avery Brooks, like, including the hair. She's taller than Sisko in this episode. Ugh. I also really enjoyed, like, watching the crew not know how to work some of this old technology.
Yes.
And, like, Miles opening up a panel and being like, I don't fucking know what any of this is. And not, like, going into the turbo lift and not knowing they have to, like, grab onto that thing to make it go. Like, that's funny. All that stuff is really, really funny.
I love the scene where Sisko, you know, he's trying to call it Akira and he slaps his shirt, the little Star Trek, you know, the Starfleet emblem. And you pointed out that Dax lived during this time. So she's just kind of waiting for Sisko to realize, like, oh yeah, I have to use the little doodad,
but also, like, laughing at him behind his back.
yeah. So again, it's just like they acknowledge all these things in it, and it really keeps in with the tone. And again, it does a really good job of the pacing. You know, I kind of alluded to the echoings, but we also have a lot of, like, fun pairings. Miles and Julian are paired off. Dax and Sisko. Even the time cops, when they're with Sisko, the time cops are very straight. They're definitely supposed to be kind of parodies of, like, Dragnet. They even they have a line about Friday, which is kind of a nice, like, wink wink too, to kind of recognize that reference. But
they were going full throwback.
yes. So there's just a lot of that good kind of banter and funny moments, and while also kind of moving the plot along. And so eventually they find out they find Darwin, who we talked about last time. Like, I actually had to rewind because suddenly it's like they find Darwin and they're back on the Defiant, and I'm like, what's going on? Like, why do Worf and Odo, where was he? And this kind of brings us to the bar scene of the Deep Space Nine episode.
Yeah. Where he's just like in the background, like walking past the door, and they're like, there he is.
Yes, they squeeze him, and I'm going to give them so much leeway on this because I heard the bar scene. I read it that it took a week just for that bar scene to choreograph everything with the new film and the old film, and getting the stunt doubles who looked like Chekhov and everything kind of perfect. And so, they chose the scene where Jones does come with the drinks and the bartender takes the drink when they are having that sight gag. I also want to point out, this is why it's called a sight gag, because you have to watch it. And your eyes are focused on that.
Yes.
So while Jones and the bartender are together, there's like a little bit of space between both their heads, and they have the older Darwin just like walking in that little space. And I really think that's why they have Odo say, it's Darwin, so that he's back there. I think that's really the only place they could put him, and it would even kind of make sense.
Oh yeah, because it happens like right in front of that open door to the bar. So like there wouldn't be any other way. If the door was closed, they're in this closed room, there's no way they would see him walk past unless the door was open. It seems like it was definitely like really tedious to make and write this episode, but at the same time it also seems like it was so much fucking fun to do it.
Oh, I'm sure. Like
having to like go through all of the footage from the original episode and see where we can fit things in, see which scenes will work, which scenes won't, like to write another story on top of this story that already exists and have it like fit correctly.
Yes.
It make that's also like really appealing work to me. Like that seems like
it's a big puzzle.
I mean, I love that shit.
But they had to do it in a way where it didn't compromise the original film, the original episode footage.
Yeah.
In a way where it's like, well, we can tell that wasn't there. So so they squeeze him in. Worf and Odo end up on the Defiant with him, and that's when Darwin just happens to reveal the plan that he has a bomb in the Tribble, and it's going to go off in an hour. That's what I love, is I don't know if Worf intimidated him or something to get that information, but they quickly tell Sisko, hey, he put a bomb in the Tribble, and he just was really nice and told us it's going to go off in an hour. Again, they're just like, don't worry, folks. We're just moving us along so you can have more of the Deep Space Nine crew on Enterprise.
Yeah, but then that like leads to the whole like Dax and Sisko searching for this Tribble bomb, and then the best moments of the two crews interacting with each other, which is them looking for the Tribble bomb and throwing the Tribbles over their shoulders, and then Tribbles like going through that opening above Kirk and falling on him.
Yes.
And how they edit it perfectly so that like it really looks like Dax just threw a Tribble at Kirk. It's wonderful.
It is probably the most clever use of intertwining the narratives from the episodes and the use of the film, because there really were just a couple of production people when they originally shot the TOS version. They were just randomly throwing Tribbles through that hatch, and they really didn't know what was going on. They're just like, keep throwing Tribbles every 10 seconds. And they bonk William Shatner on the head. And so the fact that they're now saying, well, actually what was happening was Dax and Sisko, or you see them scanning these Tribbles, and then when they don't have the bomb, they're just throwing them over their shoulder. It's really a fun thing. And one of the things we pointed out is that all these little kind of weaving of the individual stories, they don't do anything to drastically change the narrative of the first episode. It's not like, oh, there was this is what was actually happening.
Yeah.
It's all just fun, fluffiness.
Yeah, it doesn't change any of the meaning of anything that happened the first time around. They're really just they're observers, and they're dealing with a new problem. Like, they're not trying to do anything else because they know that gets resolved on its own. Yeah.
Sometimes I don't like time travel episodes because there's always that sort of cliche story beat of there's some character in that timeline that has to be an ally, and our characters are trying to convince that person that, no, I'm really from the future, and they go, no, you're crazy. And I did.
Oh, are you talking about Star Trek First Contact?
Oh, so many things. No, so many things.
No, I know there's so many.
I mean, not just Star Trek, just sci-fi in general.
Yes, absolutely.
And I always feel like I'm just kind of waiting for that ally character to get it, to be on the ship or be like, oh my God, you were telling the truth. And that doesn't happen here. So for me, it's very enjoyable on that level too.
Yes, totally. We don't have to worry about it. Like the only connection is Arn Darvin, who I don't think we mentioned is played by the same actor in both episodes.
And he looks great, by the way. He literally,
he looks great. He looks exactly the same. Yeah. It's amazing.
Whenever they age someone on a TV show and they just like add a few wrinkles and gray hair, I mean, that's literally how he is aged. So yeah, he's a lot of fun.
I mean, that's kind of the whole thing about doing an episode like this. They knew which stakes were high, and the story stakes are not high in this episode. It's everything else. They know the fandom, and they are fans themselves, and they just want to do a great job. I'm just like so into it. Oh, I had just like a couple tiny things, which were
go for it.
Which were Julian's excuses to try to have sex with that lady.
God. Which is like, why?
What if I'm my own grandfather? Shut the fuck up, Julian.
Also, it's like, I can't see that being a turn on.
That's gross.
Yes.
I was like, ew, dude. Stop it.
Which is also kind of fun that they also bring up the kind of cliche time travel.
That cliche paradox thing. Yeah.
But you know what? Like, to me, that was just more of laughing at time travel storylines. I feel like Dax's.
Yeah, I guess so.
I feel like Dax's moment where she acknowledges where she knows McCoy.
Oh, that she fucked McCoy.
Yeah, like that to me felt way more Julian, where it was like, whoa, we get it.
Like, do you need that in there? You could argue that it's like, empowering for like a woman to like be able to, talk about her sexual past. But like, I didn't really care about that part.
Well, and in the original,
like, what did she say? I always knew he would be a surgeon.
Yeah, or he's like, I always knew he'd be a doctor. He has the hands of a surgeon. And it does the little eyebrow lift that you can't see Larissa doing. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's like she's like, oh, Spock is so handsome, and Larissa, you pointed out that like Dax's character's been a long time, and they definitely allude to the fact that she's dating people and she's comfortable for her sexuality, and that's great. But in this episode, it's just funny because she comes off a little Julian-esque.
Yeah, she does. She's just like, ooh, 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 ooh.
and it is a little funky with, again, like seeing this footage of DeForest Kelley. Not that he isn't a handsome man, but, she's kind of like swooning over these old memories, and he's right there. And I'm like, it's like we're talking about sleeping with your great grandma, and then there's this. Like, I don't know if these word pictures in my head are exactly what I want to be seeing.
Yeah, I'm not really going the direction I wanted to. But also, it only lasts for a second, then it's over.
True. Oh, I also have to say the exploding Tribble footage, because they finally do find it, and they're just like, get it off the station. And it literally is just the station, and filling the frame is this Tribble that's just kind of like floating in space, and then it goes boom in this dramatic explosion, and I laughed out loud. It's wonderful.
Oh, it's hilarious. Oh wait, so one more thing, which is they bring Tribbles back.
Yes, the end.
And there's Tribbles all over DS9, and they're like sitting on Quark's head and shit. Like what? But then they leave it open ended. Like what happens to them? Like what?
It's one of those things where it's just a tie into the original, and you're just supposed to assume they figure it out. And I suggested the first time we recorded this that they maybe a freighter, maybe Cassidy Yates' freighter, sends them to Ducat, And
Yes.
they're like, sir, a freighter's coming in. And he opens it up and all the Tribbles spell out Endicott. And you see him raise his fist and go, Sisko! Not really, but...
To be honest, I would prefer that to this ending. Like, it would be a great callback to the fact that they, like, basically punked the Klingons by sending all the Tribbles to them. Like, let's punk Dukat, send him this pile of Tribbles, and then see what happens. That could be, I mean, potentially the end of the Cardassian Empire. They just get destroyed, demolished by the Tribbles.
The founders, the Jem'Hadar, it's all done.
Oh god.
Because of Tribbles.
Oh. All right. Well, I mean, I feel like that really wraps the DS9 ep.
We're ready for the Trouble with Edward.
Yeah, so there's one more time in Star Trek history that there's an entire episode dedicated to Tribbles and the drama surrounding Tribbles, and that is a very recent episode. It came out last year on the new series Short Treks on CBS All Access, and it is in season 2 of that series. It's the second episode, and it's called The Trouble with Edward.
Just a heads up to everyone. This is something where I'm going to say, if you haven't seen this, it's 15 minutes. You may want to go and pause us, go watch it, and then come back if you don't want to be spoiled.
Yeah. So this episode is from the second season of Short Treks, which is this newish series on CBS All Access, where they kind of do little side stories that take place in the universe of Discovery or Picard. So you'll have like a side character that's explored a little more, but this one is in the Discovery universe, and it is, so you'll see like some characters in it that are on Star Trek Discovery, but they're not going to be main characters. This is going to be...
Yeah, like Pike shows up for a very small part in the beginning.
Yeah, so you do get to like look at Anson Mount's beautiful, perfect face for a little while. Anyway, season 2, episode 2 of Short Treks, The Trouble with Edward. So the first thing we see is a science officer. She has just been given her first command of a science vessel, and she's leaving the Enterprise, which is currently being commanded by Captain Pike. And he's sending her off to her first command. So he gives her a little advice, and she beams over to this other ship. Then we're in this like meeting, with her staff, where she's introducing herself, and she's like, figuring out what everyone does. And one of the people at this meeting is H. John Benjamin, who, if you don't know him, he is the voice of Bob in Bob's Burgers. He's also the voice of the vegetable can from Wet Hot American Summer.
Okay, forgot about that.
Yes. He is like sort of a deadpan comedian, voice actor guy. He made a jazz album a while back, and he doesn't play piano, or he just like, it's hilarious. So like basically you know what you're getting when you see this guy. Like he's just going to be ridiculous.
This guy exists in every office, and this meeting, my notes say, this meeting is familiar, because I feel like it really is supposed to be like a slice of life situation where they're in a meeting. It totally feels like the meeting you had last week. And yeah, like it's definitely very self-aware of what it's doing. And so, yeah, he comes off as that guy who's just doesn't quite fit in the office.
Yes, because he's maybe an incel. That's in my notes, is Edward an incel? He's so sensitive. He's incompetent. He's unprepared. And all of these interactions are very like current times interactions. They don't feel like Star Trek interactions. This is supposed to be like, it seems like it's a goofy experiment.
Yeah, I think I said the first time, it was like if you took an episode of The Office and just put a Star Trek skin over it, and
yes, exactly.
And the people making it are very aware of that.
So he's basically there at the table trying to like explain what he does on the ship, and he starts talking about Tribbles and then starts saying some weird shit about Tribbles, like that they're all meat. They're like a big scallop. And then he talks about how they would be a good food. So he was researching them as a food source for something, and then he admits that he's eaten some of them, and then the whole staff is like, what the fuck, this feels wrong, and are they sentient? And he's like, well, I can breed them so they have brain damage, and then that takes care of that problem. And they're like, no. And the captain's like, maybe put that experiment on pause because it sounds insane, and we're gonna focus on some other stuff. And he like is so mad about this because he feels like he's been embarrassed. So then he's like grumbling to his coworkers about it, and ends up like middle of the night sending a complaint to Starfleet about his this new captain. I think
several complaints, if I remember the episode.
Yes. So of course she confronts him about it. She calls him into her ready room, and she's like, dude, I know you did this. And he's like, no, I didn't. And she's like, yes, you did. And also, basically, you're fired. I'm having you transferred. This makes him so mad that he ends up going back to the lab and mixing his own DNA with the Tribbles. Keep in mind that the Discovery timeline takes place before the original series.
Yes, so because he's talking about in the meeting how if he could get them to breed fast enough, that they would even be a better food source.
Yeah, so we're now like getting into that territory where the story is kind of changing history as far as the understood series of events is supposed to go. Like, it doesn't really make sense, but it also doesn't really matter. So he ends up combining his own DNA with the Tribble DNA, and he is the reason why they are born pregnant. And he ends up like standing in the hallway with his pants off, like, which is so John Benjamin to do anyway, while the entire crew is freaking out and trying to figure out what the fuck is happening, because all of a sudden there are Tribbles everywhere. So that we then see like them like trying to clean Tribbles out of ducts and like off the floor, and we get another person sitting on a Tribble. Like, there's somebody that sits on a Tribble in every episode that we've talked about. So, and it's the captain sits on the Tribble every episode. So we're in this situation where the Tribbles are just like going nuts. He's not doing anything to help, and he ends up basically drowning in a huge colossal wave of Tribbles right before the entire crew escapes in an escape pod, and as the whole ship is being filled with Tribbles, all the while yelling that he's not stupid.
Dumb is the word.
He's not dumb. Yeah. He's not dumb. And then at the end, the captain is sitting in front of a board of inquiry. I'm assuming it's Starfleet, and they're like, what the fuck happened? It's your first command, and you lost a crew member and the entire ship was destroyed, but you're saying that it was his fault. Like, why was it his fault? And she says he was an idiot.
Yes, it's kind of a very important thing that from the meeting, the Edward character is tripping over himself and doesn't come off very well. And then when he sends these anonymous messages, well, he keeps saying like, you called me dumb, and she's like, I never said you were dumb. And that becomes like a thread throughout the whole episode, because he still keeps harping on this word dumb being used to describe him. And so by the very end, where he's like, I'm not dumb, I've just discovered one of the most important scientific, discoveries. And then at the very end, of course, they say, what do you have to say? And you're waiting for her, at least I was, to say he was dumb. But of course, the episode one-ups me, and she says he was an idiot. So of course, she can still maintain that position of
that she never said he was dumb.
I never called you dumb. Back to your point though about the Tribbles. I mean, they multiply, and the way the Tribble multiplying effect happens is very much in the manner of, say, water filling a submarine. I mean, they really we've talked about tone during this episode of the podcast, and I think what's brilliant about this is that they go from kind of this almost The Office tone to it turning into like a horror movie.
Yeah.
And if Discovery and Picard have been discussed as being maybe more dark than the past Star Trek entities, even literally, like my first note is, ugh, ship is so dark. It's just like that low light.
That is my main complaint. When I first started watching Discovery, my main complaint was, don't they want to see what they're doing?
We don't have
like,
that.
Turn on the light.
Yeah, we don't have that classic TV lighting that we're used to. But in this case, I think it was brilliant because it was used to really good effect with this short trek, where it changes from a more kind of quirky, lighthearted tone. I love the use of the Johnny Appleseed song by Bing Crosby.
Oh, yeah.
And then it rolls into a much more kind of, I mean, it's still silly, but it's frightening. You have this wave of Tribbles. You have a scene when they do this montage of a female crew member. She is up against the ceiling of whatever room she's in, like banging on the ceiling the way you would if water is up to your neck and you can't breathe. But she's surrounded by Tribbles, like not water. But yeah, it's silly, but it's also terrifying.
Yeah, it is. It is scary. And that's definitely something to mention, that Tribbles seem like this benign, like cute little thing, but they end up destroying shit in every single one of these episodes just because of the sheer power with which they duplicate themselves.
Yes.
Basically,
it is the first time that you see them, and you go back to what Worf was saying about how they were just a complete menace to the Klingon Empire, and you're starting to see the full threat of the critters.
Yes.
Or the Tribbles. I'm thinking of critters from the 80s again, but yeah.
Oh, I thought you were just saying critters. Like Southern.
Little critters.
Little critters. So I really, really enjoy this episode, but there is part of me that's like it sort of feels like, did you see Joker?
You know what? I just saw it, actually. I was behind.
It's like what happens when you don't pay enough attention to somebody who's going to go nuts. Like, same reason why like a lot of incels really loved Joker was because they felt vindicated to like become violent and go like crazy because they didn't get the things that they wanted. And like that is sort of the same premise for this, that like he, first of all, what happened with his psyche eval and like how is he even on a ship anyway? But like he doesn't get exactly what he wants from this captain, so he destroys the whole ship.
Yes, and
you know,
and he that actor plays it beautifully. We were talking the first time how like there have been sort of misfits in Star Trek. Like Barclay is probably one of the better known ones. But it is very different. Like I don't think we can highlight enough for people who haven't seen this that the way this character is played, he's very unsympathetic. He's purposely.
Oh yes, you do not feel sorry for him at all.
Yes, like when the Tribbles start to take over, he's like, I'm not helping. Like he's just
literally standing in the hallway with no pants on
because it's in the middle of he's sleeping, and he's like, what's going on? But yeah, like he's definitely written and played that way, where because of what they're going for in the story, like he doesn't come off like a Barclay or anything like that. We're not making fun of people who can't, gel with a crowd as easily as others.
Right. We're not talking about like maybe somebody who's on the autism spectrum here. Like we're talking about like a dude that just sucks. Like this dude just sucks. He does not give a shit about anybody but himself. And there is no reason he should be serving on a starship. But again, it is very fun. I love H. John Benjamin. I always have really enjoyed everything he does. And he is a lot of fun to watch. And it's just a tiny little like dark comedy thing. It's fun. So, but then there's that thing if you do watch it, make sure that you watch all the way through the credits, because there is a post-credits scene that is a commercial for Tribble cereal, and it is very, very ridiculous.
You might have to watch it twice to actually catch everything.
Yes, with like all the references, and like it really like, sends me back to like, probably our childhood in the 80s when there were like commercials for cereal all the time. Like,
oh yeah, and you had like Smack'ems the frog and Cookie Crisp, like all those crazy cartoon characters. They just spoof it
Tony
so
the
well.
Tiger. Yeah. Yeah. It's really fun. It just seems like they had a lot of fun with this. So I mean, I appreciate it. I mean, to be honest, like aside from like Gene and some of the writers hating Trouble with Tribbles, it does seem like there are some moments in all of these that people are really actually enjoying themselves and having a good time.
I haven't seen that much Discovery. And then, I saw Picard. But I have to admit, out of all of the kind of newer Star Trek content, I really liked, I think, the short trek the most. Even though we're acknowledging that the characters are not Star Trek characters, really.
Yeah.
They're just kind of wearing that skin and stuff. But I think what's exciting about the short treks is that they are this wonderful playground. The short treks, to me, are exciting. They're almost kind of like a Black Mirror or, anthology setup where you can just have all these little stories and experiments, and you can bring in different directors. You can take in different ideas that maybe would be more risky for one of the bigger shows or a movie, and just try out things like that. And so this one I just thought was really fun and well made. And I'm excited for the potential of what it could do in the franchise. There are a couple of side gags I do want to point out, which are great in this episode. Okay. One is especially in the beginning when it's more silly before it goes on like full horror story, is in the beginning when they're just trying to clean up the Tribbles. They're starting to multiply and they're trying to get a hold of the situation. They show people kind of picking them up and maybe putting them in bags, but they show Edward putting them in a giant chef pot, like a lobster pot. Because again, he's talking about like, no, you can eat them. It's great. So he's just got like 3 seconds of putting them in a chef pot. And then while they're talking, just in the background, you see this Starfleet person coming by with this giant like backpack Tribble vacuum, like sucking up Tribbles, like foomp, foomp. And it's just there. And again, it's just all 3 of these episodes are just like little visual things that are really fun that you can pick up on.
Yeah, that vacuum cleaner felt very like Seussian. Yeah, you know what I mean?
It's ridiculously big.
I had so much fun rewatching these 3 episodes. I have to admit that like when I go to Star Trek for escapism or comfort or whatever, I usually choose something serious for some reason. Like I usually choose an episode that makes me like feel like heartwarming feelings or makes me feel like connected, or like an episode that has like really strong moral purpose. And I usually don't go to something silly. You know what I mean?
Okay.
And I think I might sort of shift gears a little bit and change how I do things, because watching these 3, I watched them all in one day, and then I like put each of them on in the background when I was doing other things throughout the week, and I felt like revived because you're giggling a lot when you're watching these episodes. You're like laughing out loud. So if you're a Star Trek fan and like you need to watch some Star Trek, but you also like need to smile and you need to laugh, like these are great episodes for that. And I would highly recommend, especially watching Trouble with Tribbles and Trials and Tribulations. Trouble with Tribbles and Trials and Tribulations back to back. It was just like a nonstop like roller coaster of fun.
It is. And again, I'll echo what I said earlier. Whether you're seeing people in person or if you're still kind of doing movie nights across Zoom and all that kind of social distancing, what's nice about these is not only are they're both fun, they're both very rewarding to watch back to back, but they're the type of Star Trek episodes that you can maybe once in a while like talk to each other. You don't want to ignore it, but some of those more kind of meaty, serious ones, if you had those on at a party like Drumhead, people might be like, "Shh, I need to hear this dialogue." And even though these episodes have a lot of great dialogue, if you miss a line or two because you're goofing around with your friends, you're not going to be completely lost.
Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, I also forgot to mention that Dan walked through the living room a few times as I was watching these episodes, and during the short trek, he was like, "What the hell is happening?" And I told him about how John Benjamin mixed his DNA with the Tribbles, and he said, "Oh, he's the Tribble daddy."
Ah, that feels like a good cosplay there too, maybe. Tribble daddy. Thank you for joining us for Tribble Talk. We'll be with you next week.
Find us in the collective at intothewormhole.show, on Instagram at intothewormhole.podcast. Into the Wormhole is brought to you by We Own This Town.
How convenient are these orbs? Like, you just need an orb for something, and we'll just orb of time. They got the orb of time. It sends them back. Great.
Yes.
Great.
Yes. Very easy. Very easy to do. Just make an orb for it. 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 Do. Just make an orb for it.